Hi, if you're planning a trip to Haleakala, I hope this video will find you well. I'll be first going over how the crew and I prepared for our backpacking trip, and in the latter half, I'll be sharing what we didn't know and wish we knew to make it an even better experience. We hiked Haleakala in the Hawaii winter season from February 24 to 26, 2023. I knew there'd be a big possibility of us hiking in the rain, but we lucked out since it was only our day one that we experienced the most rain. The temperature ranged from being in the 40s to 50s Fahrenheit, but I will talk about the temps in the latter half. In the weeks leading to the trip, I would try to do some long hikes on the weekends, and if I'm not hiking, then I'd work out at home, do some leg strength training or cardio training. 2, the group and I originally planned to meet in person to go over who should bring what communal items to help avoid everyone carrying the same thing. Because January and February was pretty rainy and stormy, we ended up FaceTiming on the weekend to go over who had what. And 3, we did a practice run by hiking at Kaena Point with our heavy backpack and gear to get used to the feeling and also to see if there are any adjustments we may need to do. We picked Kaena Point because we knew that there were parts of Haleakala that involved hiking through the sand. After much research, there were specific things that we made sure to bring for this trip. We all made sure to have gaiters to prevent sand from going in our shoes since there'd be sections of the hike where we'll trudge through sand. I ended up using the gaiters on day 1 and 2 only. Day 3 there was no sandy terrain. Bring sun protection gear like having a buff and UV hand gloves. Because we are in Haleakala, which also means House of the Sun, we are very high up. There's 30% more UV radiation up here compared to sea level, so it's important to stay protected to avoid from getting sunburned. Moleskin. I normally don't blister, but it was a good thing we brought it because I had blisters on my inner arches of my foot after coming down sliding sands. We came across some blogs where people experienced blisters, and thank God we brought it. I think walking in the soft sand was one of the causes to getting the blisters. Speaking of moleskin, I needed to use something to cut the moleskin, so it was good to have a utility multi-tool on hand. Daniel brought his and I was able to use scissors. Paracord and bread clips. Some of us brought paracord so that we can hang our clothes to dry out in the cabin. In Paliku, there was only one short line that was already there on top the stove. In Holua, there was one long line already set up between the beds. Something I didn't know was that there were bars inside the windows that you can also use to hang clothes and items. A big tip, instead of bringing a clothespin, bringing bread clips that are used to close the bread bag is a perfect alternative. It's super small and super light. Water bottles instead of bringing a bladder. Because we were hiking in cool temperatures and water was available at each cabin, Daniel and Bernice bought a water bottle holder that you can attach to your backpack strap for easy access. They just carried a 1 to 1.5 liter water bottle and used that as their drinking source. Instead of a twist cap, they also invested in buying a replacement cap so it's easier to drink out of. This is just one way of carrying your water, but I think Bernice and Daniel's way was pretty efficient. Speaking of water, at each cabin, there is a spigot you can get water from right outside the cabin. And if you're inside the cabin, there's a faucet you can use to get water. Just be sure to bring a filter or just treat the water since it's non-potable. Lastly, something to always have when being in the backcountry is having a GPS tracker with satellite access. Keep in mind that rangers don't frequently patrol the crater floor. So if there's an emergency and you don't have any signal, know that you're far away from reaching the visitor center or a ranger. I had my Garmin InReach Mini 2 with me, and I also had my iPhone that had the SOS feature. Next, I'll be sharing things we wished we knew before we started the hike and sharing some helpful tips. Fuel cans. We thought we were able to get them at Walmart after arriving in Kahului, and surprisingly, they didn't have any. By doing a quick Yelp search, Ace Hardware had, but because it was already late at night, they were closed. So the next morning, we made sure to stop by Ace Hardware. They opened at 7 a.m. that day. There were 2 Ace Hardware stores coming from Wailuku on the way to Haleakala, and we went to the closest one just in case that one didn't have any, and then we can go to the second one. So just keep in mind which places have gas and also their store hours so that you can plan your hiking timeline accordingly. One thing we didn't even bother to research was what time the visitor center would open. Know that they open at 8:30 a.m. We got to the visitor center at 8:20, so we were lucky we only waited for 10 minutes. But it's always good to stop by the visitor center and talk to the rangers just to get further advice like how the weather's looking and etc. Hitchhiking good to knows. We knew that there was a hitchhiking pullout area designated for hikers since there are some of the hiking routes that involve starting at Sliding Sands and ending at the Halemau'u trailhead. What I didn't know was that there was a short 2 to 3 minute trail to get to the pullout from where we parked our car, so that's good to know. I thought we had to walk along the main road, which is pretty dangerous. Expect on average a 30-minute window to get picked up. Other YouTube videos we watched, we saw vloggers getting picked up around the 30-minute mark, which also happened to us. Keep in mind your hiking start time, and if you haven't gotten picked up yet, you can always figure out the hitchhiking when you finish hiking. It's about a 15-minute drive from Halemau'u trailhead to the Sliding Sands trailhead. The weather is unpredictable. While we were going down the Kionehe'ehe'e trail, we would shed layers and then put it back on. The clouds at Haleakala move so fast that the sun would poke through here and there, and so it can be cold and then we'd feel the heat, having us want to shed a layer. The temperature throughout the 3 days ranged from 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you get closer to Paliku Cabin, expect cooler temperatures and socked-in views. Paliku was the coldest, and when we were 1 mile away from reaching the cabin, heavy rain poured on us. For day 2, leaving Paliku was cold and rainy, but once we passed the first junction at the 1 mile mark, it was a very clear day. Some of the crew had to take off layers and even converted to shorts. It was about in the upper 40s and early 50s, but with the sun out made it for very comfortable weather. Day 3 felt the warmest, especially going up the switchback since it was a super sunny day. Only when we hit the fence line we were soaking in the clouds. It was in the mid-40s when we were about a mile from finishing. If you're trying to do night photography, Holua Cabin would be the best spot to shoot at. Altitude sickness affects everyone differently. One of us felt altitude sickness going down Sliding Sands. It's important to know the signs of altitude sickness like nausea, dizziness, and hard time breathing. I noticed that when we gained elevation, I would have a hard time breathing because my chest felt so heavy. Important tip is to go slow whenever you change elevation and also know your limits. The cabins. The cabins were very clean, and it's great that they had sleeping pads, which was one less thing to carry. There were some pots, lighters, and gas cans at each cabin, but I wouldn't rely on it. Whoever is the cabin permit holder is given 3 logs. I was assigned a locker with the combination code given via email a couple days before the reservation date. 3 logs was enough to keep us warm for 1 night. It took us a while though to light the fire because the logs were damp, so just know it might take a while. One weird tip, Fritos make a good fire starter. Nene. They were great to see, especially since they are an endangered native species. Just note that the nenes at Paliku Cabin were very chill and would create distance, whereas the nenes at Holua Cabin were much aggressive and willing to come close to you. I think because Holua Cabin is a popular rest spot for day hikers, they were probably being fed and they got used to the company. However, one of the rules of the park is to never feed the nene. If you're into seeing the Hawaiian native birds, the best spot to see it is behind Paliku Cabin. Early morning, the whole forest was full of birdsong. If I were to redo this trip, I wished we spent more time looking for native birds and also to bring a pair of binoculars. While we hiked, we would always see a red-colored bird flying. Either it's probably a apapani or EEV. Finally, I wanted to share about the native plants we've seen. You'll see majority of the native plants from Kapala'o Cabin to Paliku. It's a nice forest full of native shrubs ranging from a'ali'i, mamane, ule, pukiave, na'e, and ohelo berries. There were some along Sliding Sands Trail and then also up the switchbacks on Halima'u, which were full of ama'u ferns, pukiave, and ohelo. Closer to the end of Halima'u Trail, mamani can be seen. And let's not forget a hina or the silver swords, which we saw them going down Sliding Sands and along the Silver Sword Loop. If you made it to the end of this video, thanks for watching this far. I hope your planning goes well and have a safe and fun trip in Haleakala. I can't believe it's been about a month since we completed this trip, but I'm very happy that I was able to share with you all what we've gone through and saw. See you guys in the next video. Aloha!